Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and for any of you who have been listening to me for any period of time at all, you know that I take my sons to hit baseballs, and I have done it with my 14-year-old since he was 7, and my 7-year-old, I started him when he was 5. And these boys hit 2 buckets of baseballs 3 days a week, and they've done it year-round since those ages, not just during baseball season, but they do it year round. And there's one common thing, the most common thing that I have to constantly correct both sons on is to keep your head down looking at that ball. Keep your eye on that ball, because the natural tendency is to swing and turn your head out and look the other way. But if you can ever train yourself to keep your eyes down on that ball, it seems basic. If you can ever train yourselves to keep your eye down on that ball, you'll hit well, very well. And that's when you get the hard hits and the consistent hits. Well, today I want to, against the backdrop of the article that came out from Ripple yesterday evening, I thought that it's a good time to remind you of what the ball is. This is not a group of people who half-baked came up with some idea that the XRP could replace Nostro money or from around the world and put a dent in the universe. This is not just some half-baked idea. These are not people that just all of a sudden said, "Oh, well, that didn't work. We're just going to go the other way now. We're going to get rid of that goal." No, that's not how this game works. So I went back and I found the videos, or just a few of them from different people at Ripple over the years, that can make you understand I wanted to focus you back in on what the ball is. Okay, and here we go. We'll start with this from Stephen Bull from the DIA.
The importance, right? What is the use case? Fine, I mean, stability is one use case, fair enough, but what are the business use cases for stable coins? So for example, when you talk about payments, for example, the biggest issue with payments today is the fact that banks and FIs have to rely on pre-funded accounts, which leads to a lot of costs, right? The cost of opening accounts, cost of compliance, and most importantly, the cost of trapped liquidity. So today we are talking about around $5 trillion worth of trapped liquidity in the banking space. To make matters worse, there is the additional complication around Basel III regulations. So it's a very complex space out there. Now, Ripple has been working in this space for almost 3 to 4 years now, and we believe that a digital asset could be used to leverage liquidity real time. Now, the problem of volatility could be solved if the digital asset has certain intrinsic qualities like speed, throughput, and scalability. So Ripple is using XRP, which is extremely fast. So the entire settlement process happens in 3 seconds. So even if the prices move, there won't be that much volatility over a span of 3 seconds. And then I think XRP has enough liquidity to help banks leverage liquidity in real time. So they need not hold XRP on their books. We are launching a new product called XRapid, which will help banks and FIs and payment providers to leverage liquidity from exchanges in real time. So we are solving the problem of volatility and also trap liquidity.
So there's no need for a mainstream stablecoin?
Maybe in the short term, yes, because it gives a sense of confidence to investors. It will lead to more adoption. But at least in my views, I don't see a long term, at least for 20 or 30 stable coins, maybe 1 or 2, which could potentially be used for some other use cases like lending, for example, or some other use cases. But yeah, I personally am bearish on stable coins.
Okay, and here's another video. This is actually a series. Here's part 1. This is from XRP Yo-Yo.
Lot of updates this year with Ripple and RippleNet, which is your blockchain that many financial institutions are using. Can you give us an update on what's going on and how they're using it, who's using it?
Absolutely. So I think, Ripple, I think, has been really fortunate in the context of the broader blockchain and crypto ecosystem, we've been very focused on a specific customer set, a specific problem around cross-border payments. We've been selling into banks and financial institutions for a few years now. We've signed up over 200 banks and financial institutions globally. Recent ones we've talked a little bit about things like MoneyGram. We announced a very big partnership with in, I guess, June. They went live in July and August, and actually even in their earnings call in August, we're talking about how they're tangibly seeing the benefits of using XRP to help facilitate their liquidity needs. So we feel really good about the momentum we have there. And even this week announced some partnerships in the crypto-specific area with BitPay, a company that allows you to use cryptocurrencies to check out at like a PayPal checkout or Visa checkout. Now we'll be supporting XRP, and CoinMe, an ATM network that will also be supporting XRP going forward. So excited about both of those.
And if I understand correctly, MoneyGram is actually using XRP in its transactions, which marks a big evolution for you because there are some financial institutions who are using Ripple but not actually XRP. Can you explain how that evolved and how that's going?
So I think, a lot of times, I talk about the more than 200 banks and financial institutions we're working with, most of them sign up and engage us on a fiat to fiat basis. Dollar to yen, dollar to Mexican peso, dollar to Argentinian peso. And that's because that's how the correspondent banking network works today. In effect, some people describe what Ripple's original product and initial product is called kind of Swift 2.0. Swift is what correspondent banks use for messaging to debit and credit the pools of liquidity. And when I say pools of liquidity, I mean like pre-funded accounts. The Bank of Jen and the Bank of Brad would have accounts at each other's banks, and you might be Mexican peso, I'd be dollar, and we debit and credit those with messaging. That works if the accounts are pre-funded. And what we have found is there's more efficient ways to manage liquidity. If you as a bank don't have to put money at my bank and I don't have to put money at your bank, I can use that money for other things. It's working capital. MoneyGram, as an example, has...
and here's part two.
As an example, has several $100 million of negative working capital. They're a public company. That's material to their business for sure. If by working with them, they can reduce the amount of pre-funding, that is very accretive to how they think about the use of capital and what they can do with that if they didn't have that negative working capital out there.
And if some of the hesitation from some of these financial institutions is that XRP being a cryptocurrency has some added volatility risk as opposed to, fiat currency, dollars, pesos, whatever it might be, how do you get over that or how do you overcome that risk?
It turns out this is a risk that is a little bit of a red herring, and it's born of, I'll use Bitcoin as an example. A Bitcoin transaction has taken as long as 8 or 10 hours on highly intense days of activity on the Bitcoin blockchain. So if you have to hold Bitcoin for 8 hours while you settle a transaction, that's a lot of volatility risk. An XRP transaction is always about 4 seconds long. So if you're only holding a highly volatile asset for 3 or 4 seconds versus holding fiat, a low volatile asset, for a Swift transaction, maybe 3 days, it turns out the volatility risk, because it's such a short amount of time, is lower using an XRP transaction than it is using a Swift transaction that might take 3 days. Now, I think people don't really understand that today, and part of the misinformation and education for us is helping people understand that. But I think that's part of the crawling and walking and run as crypto goes from, I think, kind of the shadows, frankly, into how do we solve real problems for real customers at scale.
Well, one thing to jump off of that point, stable coins are all the rage right now. Everybody's coming out with a dollar-backed or some other sort of asset-backed coins that they can conduct trades quickly, seamlessly, but also without the volatility. So what would be the advantage of using XRP, for instance, rather than using, one of these more sort of like designed to be fully stable assets? Yeah,
a stable coin like USDC, for example, that Coinbase and Circle have done. I think that is interesting in mitigating volatility, but you still have to go from dollar to peso, right? So at some point you have a bridge. Somebody has to bridge that. And in effect, what Ripple's doing is let's make XRP the most efficient, the most liquid, and the easiest to bridge by, as an example.
All right. And then there's part three.
The most liquid and the easiest to bridge by selling effectively the connectors on both ends, selling APIs to allow people to connect to both ends of that. If we have hundreds of banks interconnected to use XRP for that, I think that bodes well for the liquidity of XRP.
It's basically who has the most liquidity is going to win this game.
I mean, that's what I believe. I think different people believe different things, but that's okay.
You have all these financial institutions who are now using XRP. Sounds like more people are using it, and yet the price has declined this year recently. Why do you think that is?
I think if I could predict the price of crypto, I would not be here. I mean, the crypto markets are hard to predict for sure. And in many cases, even now, the altcoin basket is very correlated. And so when I say altcoin, I mean everything but Bitcoin. Bitcoin has outperformed the rest.
Okay, well, we don't need to watch the rest of that. I'm going to go on to the next video. I'm trying to give you a good picture of what the big ball, the ball that we need to have our eyes on it. And they've been telling you for years. And I just wanted to do a little reminder video here.
Cases that people are working on. The two problems that we are mainly solving for is cost of liquidity, right? So when money needs to move, as you know, say, for example, somebody's sending money from UAE to Kenya, it'll move from AED into US dollars into Kenyan shilling. And a lot of time, a very large amount of your principal will get lost just in terms of movement of this foreign exchange. With Ripple, with our software, and it's already live between US dollar to Mexico corridor, it'll move between UAE Kenyan shilling, and with which the loss will be quite minimal, and with which we can certainly say that the cost of remittance will go down, because it's far more efficient way of transferring money, because there is no Nostro accounts that are required. As you know, there is about $5 to $10 trillion of capital that banks keep with their counterparty banks in the destination country to make these transfers possible. So that's the big liquidity cost that we eliminate. The second thing that we eliminate is the cost of errors. As you know, the infrastructure or the plumbing for the international payments was built 50, 60 years ago. It still runs on, you can call it telex technology, right? Whereas the new infrastructure for the internet world, it requires an API-based software system which Ripple pioneers. And a combination of both these things put together should bring the cost. Imagine all of us earning in the room, and most of us are could be foreigners to UAE, lose 7% of our income just because we are transferring money from one place to another. I mean, to my mind, it's unacceptable.
All right. And then this one is from Stephen Bull from the DF. This is Ryan Zagone, who was one of the guys running the show a long time ago, regulatory guy.
No confidential information.
Okay.
When we look into the future, right now we're live with several financial institutions with a pipeline of 120 that we're working with now to integrate. So I think in the future we see two things: scale, the network growing, more financial institutions and more currencies in more countries. Second, we see a greater use of crypto assets in traditional finance. I think that will be a turning point that we start to see this year, and not used in a replacement for fiat currency, but as a tool to bridge them more efficiently. We're in pilot right now with Western Union, MoneyGram, and 4 or 5 other payment companies, looking to get greater reach without the cost of pre-funding and with a more efficient way to source FX. Some of our early pilots a few years ago that we've been building off of showed the potential to lower your FX cost by about 60%, to lower the operational cost of a cross-border payment materially when you introduce these new types of tools to source FX. That has a lot of potential. It's still in pilot. We're still specializing that product, as we referenced earlier. But that I see coming into the fold this year. And this change in mindset of blockchain good, crypto bad, looking at it more broadly as these are tools that have many different use cases. And we're starting to see new, productive, positive use cases come to the forefront.
Makes sense.
No
right.
confidential.
So that was Ryan Zagone. And then this was Ripple liquidity provisioning with RippleNet. This is from 2018.
Many banks have over 1,000 active Nostro accounts that collectively hold hundreds of millions of dollars. This isn't uncommon. It's simply the cost of doing business in transaction banking. This creates several problems for banks. First, it's inefficient. The required funds for large Nostro networks are immense and sit idle. Second, it's costly. The unavoidable manual reconciliations result in high costs. And third, it's risky. The exposure to both counterparty and foreign exchange risk is high. And because of this, we know that solving for real-time payments is only half the battle. The other half is solving for our customers' global liquidity pain points. We're solving these pain points through RippleNet. a global network of financial institutions using the same technology, rules, and governance. Through RippleNet, we're helping customers overcome their liquidity pain points in two ways. First, through flexible options to support customers' existing liquidity arrangements, as well as to supplement them with new arrangements, including third-party liquidity and settlement through digital assets. Second, through pathfinding, which is the ability to link multiple liquidity arrangements in a single transaction, smart routing across the network to gain a variety of net new benefits. Banks can choose between a number of liquidity arrangements to optimize for costs, risks, and capital efficiency. Let's overview the 3 liquidity arrangements supported by RippleNet. First are bank-to-bank fiat relationships, also known as Nostro account relationships. We support this model so that customers can leverage their existing relationships. This enables the banks that are provisioning liquidity to earn FX revenues, making it ideal for strategic high-volume corridors. With this liquidity arrangement, Bank A and/or Bank B would have a Nostro account with the other bank, pre-funding it in the destination currency. Or there could be a credit relationship with the two banks. Second are third-party liquidity arrangements, which allow banks to rationalize their Nostro relationships, keeping only relationships they want versus the ones they need. This enables banks to overcome the costs from corridors where liquidity can be expensive. This is an ideal option for medium-volume corridors. With this liquidity arrangement, a third party would open foreign currency accounts at both financial institutions for them to use for payout in each country. Third is the ability to settle payments via a digital asset, XRP. XRP's speed, scalability, and cost make it the ideal bridge asset for cross-border payments. This allows banks to grow their payments volume and reach without accumulating more direct liquidity relationships. With XRP's trading volume at higher daily average than most exotic currencies, it makes it an ideal bridge asset for payments into exotic corridors. With this liquidity arrangement, each bank either holds XRP directly or leverages an exchange to source XRP. This serves as an on-demand, fungible liquidity pool that can be used for payments. RippleNet resolves today's liquidity pain points in these ways. It's more capital efficient. The diverse options for liquidity provisioning allow banks to shrink their Nostro network. It costs less. The atomic pass-fail processing automates reconciliations, saving 60% in operational costs. And finally, it reduces risk. The real-time settlement and fewer direct relationships decrease overall risk. At Ripple, we're not just solving for better technical connectivity between banks, we're also solving for the other side of the equation, global liquidity. To learn more, please
Makes you wonder why they're creating this platform in Iceland that I talked about in the last video. That should be, stay tuned. That should be very interesting. Now, finally, I wanted to drive this point home with one last clip. This is no more than, this is 6 days ago, folks. 6 days ago. This is Greg Kidd when I interviewed him, and this is when he talks about Nostro accounts. So my point is that here, you got this article that comes out last night, and everybody's freaking out like, oh, the whole game's being changed. No, this guy has Chris Larson and Karen Gifford, who was they were both one of the first 2 people at Ripple with him. They're on the board at Global ID that he's the CEO of. He speaks with the people at Ripple. This guy's not somebody who's not plugged in. The Link 2 platform that he funds, where I was doing this interview, that platform, they can't sell their SPVs without communicating with Ripple and getting Ripple's permission. This guy is in direct link with Ripple. And so he's not saying what he says here 6 days ago, thinking that they're changing the plan all of a sudden.
Well, there's a limited amount of XRP in the world. I mean, 100 billion sounds like a big number. But look, what is XRP competing with? Right now in the correspondent banking system, banks have to deposit money, Nostro, Vostro, all around the world. So there's pots of liquidity so that things can move from one silo to another. The way that all works is with pre-funded liquidity. And all that pre-funded liquidity happens in all the different fiat currencies of the world. So if you really want to be able to service money all around and move it, you've got to have all these pre-funded pots and all these different currencies. But if you could agree on one currency and one that you could replenish, not just 9 to 5, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you'd need less liquidity, because you could see that when you're getting low, you can restock. And how long does it take to restock? 3 seconds. How much does it cost to restock? Less than a penny. And so the advantage of XRP is it's a much more efficient method of moving liquidity around. It would be like having an engine that ran on a teacup of oil rather than a gallon of oil. Everything still needs liquidity. Pre-funding is good, but when you can top up your pre-funding in 3 seconds, you need a lot less oil in the engine for the engine to work well. And that's what Ripple brought to the market.
Are you saying that a lot of that Nostro money one day is going to be in XRP? Is that the ultimate goal?
Oh, it's going to be replaced. It's going to be replaced by XRP. And so that just that demand for the thimble of oil, like that thimble is pretty big. And so if all the banks need just enough XRP to handle their liquidity requirements, and you also have money transmitters doing it, and maybe even just major corporations are doing it as well, they're just posting their own liquidity around. Everybody needs less liquidity than they needed Nostro and Vostro fiat currency, but that's still a lot of practical need for XRP. And so I think Ripple's done some of those calculations. If each bank around the world and each other regulated financial institution had just enough XRP for their liquidity needs, that would create amazing practical demand for XRP all around the world. Just like there's only 21 million Bitcoins, if people want to have that in their portfolio as like a defensive asset, by the time all the different retirement funds, hedge funds, individuals buy just to have a little bit of extra of Bitcoin tucked away, that creates an overall aggregate demand for Bitcoin. Same is true for Ripple, although its purpose is not just like as a panic currency, it's for a very specific task, creating an alternative to the heavy liquidity needs for the current Nostro Vostro system of correspondent banking.
And we are talking trillions.
Yeah, there's trillions. This is the huge kind of deadweight loss in the economy when you have money tied up just so you don't run out when you're trying to like move funds from one country to another. It's a deadweight drag on society to have a huge amount of our liquidity tied up in Nostro Vostro accounts around the world.
So there you have it. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and tell your friends and families that it's always been about Nostro Vostro accounts, and that is not changed. Thank you for listening.